Welcome to On the Pen. We just wrapped up listening to the 2025 Q2 earnings call for Novo Nordisk, where we learned that compounded semaglutide is the scapegoat for all the woes that Novo Nordisk has ever faced. We're going to get into it. A lot of nonsense that we need to unpack here and untangle. But there's a lot of great news too. Future pipeline medications for obesity, et cetera. We're going to get into all of it. Before we do, hit the like button, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button as well. All of those things help grow what we're doing here. And if you enjoy information that helps you have better conversations with your doctor, this is the channel for you. So make sure that you subscribe along. Let's get into it. We're going to cover the CEO, the new CEO who starts tomorrow on the job tomorrow. Get ready because it is going to be trial by fire for him. We're going to get into the GLP-1 conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about Ozempic and Wegovy sales and how that is shaping out for Novo Nordisk. We're going to get into the future stars of the show for Novo Nordisk, like Amycretin, CagriSema, high-dose semaglutide. We'll talk about some other pipeline medications from them and as well as the strategy moving forward. So we are going to get into it. And before we do, again, I just encourage you to hit the thumbs up button because that's going to train the algorithm to send you more information just like this. We've been covering these earnings calls now for several years. Several years, you heard me correct, especially with Eli Lilly. But we've been following the Novo Nordisk ones as well, although their pipeline has been less inspiring to me than the Eli Lilly pipeline. But we're going to get into it. So early on in the call, we learned that the new CEO is taking over tomorrow. So Mike Doustdar is going to be taking over for Lars Jorgensen, a seasoned veteran at Novo Nordisk who has overseen Novo Nordisk during the rise and the really meteoric rise of GLP-1 medications, specifically Ozempic. Now, under his leadership, Ozempic became a household name. Semaglutide became a household name. And really just a tremendous leadership that Lars Jorgensen brought to the organization and to the fight against obesity. So we commend Lars Jorgensen for his tenure at Novo Nordisk, and we eagerly look forward to the actions that the new CEO, Mike Doustdar, will be taking as president and CEO of Novo Nordisk starting tomorrow. Now, what we learned about his strategy here and his focus is just all about execution, specifically in diabetes and obesity. Now, that harkens back to the history of Novo Nordisk, right? And all of that they've done to develop treatments for diabetes and obesity. And they are really specifically honing in on the GLP-1 incretin line to expand. Now, it's interesting that he says this just to start off, because one of the main things we learned in this earnings call, in my opinion, is that they're dropping the cannabinoid receptor obesity medicine that was in early clinical trials. That one was specifically interesting because anything that doesn't target incretin hormones alone or nutrient stimulated hormones alone is fascinating to me. They're dropping that one. And we also learned just a few weeks back between the last earnings call and this earnings call that they're dropping a GLP-1 GIP candidate, so a direct competitor to Zepbound, and they're dropping it. And one of the reasons I find that interesting is because Empower Pharmacy, who is basically challenging the patent for tirzepatide and Eli Lilly, they're basically saying, well, GLP-1 GIP and tirzepatide could have been made by anybody who knows what they're doing. Well, obviously, now we've had two failed candidates from Novo Nordisk alone, GLP-1 GIP, that haven't ever materialized. And so it's honestly not as simple as maybe Empower's making it out to be. If that were the case, then why would we have Novo Nordisk abandoning two of them? Not to mention you have Viking Therapeutics over here on the side working on VK2735 oral and injectable that looks to rival retatrutide in its efficacy, right? I'm not even talking about tirzepatide. It could rival, but at the end of the day, it could rival retatrutide. So clearly, there are ways to build it and improve upon it that aren't as simple as just, common knowledge between people who understand chemistry and compounds like this. So interesting sort of tidbit to go along with his focus, but he wants to move faster and be more agile, especially in markets outside the US, where Novo Nordisk has been quite dominant and continues to be. There's some other shakeups within the upper echelons of the C-suite at Novo Nordisk because of the retirement of their chief scientific officer, Marcus Schindler. Now, Marcus Schindler was the one who really oversaw, from a scientific standpoint, the development and shaping of these early GLP-1 innovations like Saxenda, Victoza, Ozempic, and Wegovy. Now, just amazing contributions to obesity medicine from Mr. Schindler, but obviously that led to a little bit of a shakeup internally. So not super important if you're following this from the patient perspective, but the shakeups at the C level of Novo Nordisk should sort of shape the direction and the future of the company and a leader in the obesity medicine space. So we'll be following it closely to see how these folks do in their positions. But let's talk a little bit about the performance of Ozempic and Wegovy. So the full year sales outlook was lowered from 8 to 14% growth, and now they've lowered it, or the full year sales outlook was lowered to 8 to 14%, up from a higher number that they gave earlier in this year in May. Now their operating profit is expected to still grow 10 to 16%. So they ain't hurting. But the price erosion is expected in the second half of this year due to cash channel strategy and lower realized prices in the United States. I think and hope that gets worse for them and better for patients. But why is this? Well, it all comes back to basically, in their estimation, GLP-1 medications and compounded GLP-1 medications more specifically. They directly blame compounded GLP-1 medications for slowing the branded obesity drug of Wegovy in the US. Now, their current CEO for the next, 16 hours or so, Lars Jorgensen, basically said that mass compounding has continued illegally since after May 22nd. Now, that was the date that the FDA gave for enforcement on this. And he basically says that the marketing that's happening under the personalization guise is nothing more than thinly veiled mass compounding, and it's illegal and shouldn't be allowed. Now, this is Novo Nordisk's standpoint. They want all semaglutide, Ozempic, and Wegovy to only come from them. And that sort of has just positioned from their perspective, compounding is all unsafe and unregulated. Again, this is more of the same nonsense from them. Now, the one argument that they do have, if you're following along and you wonder, like, how can they even say that? The one thing that they do have in their back pocket with the FDA is the fact that semaglutide is made from a recombinant yeast-based process. Now, that's not going to mean much of anything to most of you. It didn't mean anything to me till I read about it, right? But essentially, they take a big yeasty brew. It's a yeast-based brew where they are able to extract the protein that later becomes semaglutide in the chemical process. But because it's derived from this yeast-based process, everything that comes on the market from the compounding world and from the research grade world is typically made from a semaglutide salt or sodium or semaglutide acetate, right? And that's this chemical process that forgoes the process of yeast-based. Now, is that important for the safety and efficacy of the drug? I think that's what their point is that it's never been tested that way, so they don't know. Right. But what we've seen anecdotally is that people respond just as well to the compounds. Some would argue even better to the compounds than they do the branded medications. Now, all of that remains to be seen how the FDA will interpret that, because just this past week, the FDA released some guidance that basically said that the non yeast-based versions of semaglutide, the acetate and the sodium versions, are not tested and shouldn't be allowed anywhere. So that would technically be semaglutide compounds. That's why it'll be really intriguing to see how closely the FDA follows that, because what we learned in this earnings call is that Novo Nordisk is petitioning very aggressively the FDA to clamp down on that. So we'll have to see what happens and if that's interpreted the same way long-term by the FDA or not. But you also hear in the background that 503B pharmacies, one of which who is suing Eli Lilly over the patent of tirzepatide, is ramping up their production of compounded tirzepatide. So this is all going to be very intriguing to watch. That's why it's super important that you subscribe to the YouTube channel, where we're going to follow this stuff explicitly, but we're also everywhere else on social media. So wherever you find your news on social media, you will find us there. And you can also visit obesity.news in your browser. Just type that in your browser as I say it, obesity.news, and put your email in, and you'll get email updates as soon as we do them. And we do them almost on a daily basis, to be honest with you. So compounds are the scapegoat for the woes that Novo Nordisk is basically putting forth in this earnings call. It's all because of compounds, right? Well, as we get to unpack this, you'll see why I think that is kind of a load of bunk. As it relates to Wegovy and Ozempic, listen, like I said, Novo Nordisk isn't hurting. Their U.S. sales grew by 37% in Wegovy, over the past quarter, and with 280,000 weekly prescriptions. Ozempic is still sitting at 690,000 weekly prescriptions, with a positive impact coming from the new chronic kidney disease indication, which is going to open the doors for folks on Medicare to have an additional indication to get on an incretin therapy if they're not diabetic. Now, Wegovy struggles with cash channel uptake. This is their NovoCare Pharmacy, which rivals Lilly Direct, with only 10% of new prescriptions coming from NovoCare Pharmacy. Now, listen to this. We learned last quarter that Eli Lilly is killing it with their direct-to-consumer play through Lilly Direct, right? Where much of their new prescriptions for Zepbound are coming directly from Lilly Direct. Why is Novo struggling, and why are their sales for Wegovy struggling? I think it's very simple. It doesn't have anything to do with compounds, because I don't think people are on compounds because they prefer to be on compounds by and large. There may be a small percentage who just hate big pharma, and so they justify their hatred for big pharma by going to a smaller version of big pharma, which is the outsourcing facilities who ain't hurting. 80 million sellable doses of compounded semaglutide last year. You start to do the numbers on that, it is big business. So it's not as if there's no altruism here, right? Let's just get that out of the way. Like, everybody's in this to make money. You don't have to like that, but you have to appreciate the fact that that is the reality, right? We have adult conversations here. There's no altruism with compounds. They're in it for money. Big pharma's in it for money, and they're all going to do everything they can do legally to protect that flow of cash. It's just how it is. It's crass, but it's how it is. So they are really hurting in terms of being able to get people to go to NovoCare Pharmacy to buy Wegovy. Why is that? Well, it may have something to do with the fact that tirzepatide, which people have become very knowledgeable and educated on because they follow channels like On the Pen, and we talk about the studies that come out. We talk about 94% of pre-diabetics not developing diabetes when they did a 4-year study on tirzepatide, right? 94% of pre-diabetics didn't develop diabetes on tirzepatide. We talk about 22% weight loss versus the 16% with Wegovy. Even though the Wegovy trial was a little bit shorter, they ramped up the doses to 7.2 milligrams in some of these studies, and now they're getting closer to tirzepatide, but they certainly haven't eclipsed it. And then even with the next generation drug, CagriSema, which is set to come out in the middle of next year, it's still right up there, maybe close to where Zepbound is, but didn't eclipse it meaningfully. So how do they justify the fact that their drug is the same price as Zepbound? I don't know. They've got a lot of really positive data that's come out, but at the end of the day, people know. People just know Zepbound is better. So people are preferring that. And the more that they know, and the more that they learn, and the more that they follow channels like On the Pen, they're going to be aware that it's just the better option. So it's time for Novo Nordisk to lower the price of Wegovy. That might help with your 10% uptake at NovoCare Pharmacy. Just a thought. But the other element that happened over this past quarter was this CVS Caremark formulary shift, where we saw nearly, I don't know, nobody really knows the exact number, but all estimates are in the hundreds of thousands of people who were on Zepbound through CVS Caremark who were forced to switch to Wegovy. Now, our friends and our partners at getclaimable.com/OTP, that's getclaimable.com/OTP, are helping patients fight that. But CVS is coming back, and they're really fighting aggressively. And some would say some of the things that they're doing are illegal. So is this teeing up some sort of legal action? We'll have to see, but I hope so. That's the quick answer. But it's past time for Novo Nordisk to start looking at this, realistically, and for CVS to start looking at this realistically. A Wegovy and a Zepbound is not a 1-for-1 swap. No matter how much Novo Nordisk wants it to be, it's not, and patients understand that. And so hopefully people will still be able to overcome that formulary shift. Check out our friends at Claimable. They're getting better at fighting this, and I hope you'll check them out. And then Rybelsus has been deprioritized in favor of Ozempic and Wegovy. So they're expecting flat growth in Rybelsus, but it's important to know too that they have already launched high-dose Rybelsus across the pond, and that they will be looking to increase the dosages in Wegovy as well, oral and injectable. So that's kind of on the heels of their pipeline drug update, Amycretin, which is this future star of the show for Novo Nordisk. Of course, they have CagriSema coming before that, but Amycretin which is going to be available in oral and injectable. They are going to be advancing to phase 3 trials in early 2026. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. If it's a 68-week trial, sometime in 2027, those phase 3 trials will end, and Amycretin will hit the market sometime 2028. Before then, though, we have I should say the reason we get excited about Amycretin is there's 24.3% weight loss at 36 weeks in a phase 1B and 2A trial. So 24.3% weight loss is better than tirzepatide in 36 weeks. Now, when they adjust the titration on that, and I think this is the thing to watch with Amycretin, when they adjust the titration, watch those numbers go down significantly, because along with that 24.3% weight loss in 36 weeks was a tremendous amount of vomiting, GI side effects. They're going to have to change that titration. So I don't know that 24.3% is going to actually increase all that much when they lengthen the trial and increase the titration process. So will Amycretin be it for Novo Nordisk? It's starting to feel like maybe not, but the side effects are going to be what we need to watch with Amycretin. But of course, before we get Amycretin, we're getting CagriSema. I still very bullish about CagriSema, and do believe some of the hate around CagriSema from the investor community is misguided because of the way that the trial was designed. People did not have to escalate to the highest dose like they did in the SURMOUNT trials for tirzepatide. If you were in SURMOUNT for tirzepatide to get that 22% weight loss, you were at the 15. You had to titrate up. In the CagriSema trial, that wasn't the case. And even though it wasn't the case, they still got to the same amount of weight loss, roughly, give or take a few, decimal point percentage points. It was right up there with tirzepatide, not even having to go to the highest dose, right? So CagriSema, I'm still bullish on, especially as a diabetic. And it's other piece of news on the CagriSema front is we covered this back in December of this past year, where we learned that essentially the dual chambered pen of CagriSema, we've talked about this. It's basically, in these pens here, like tirzepatide, it's just one chamber. All the drug is in that little glass vial there. It pushes out in there. The CagriSema is like 2 chambers, one here, roughly. And when you inject it, both come down through the needle together, but they are held differently because they have different pH requirements. Now, back in December, Novo Nordisk actually created a co-formulation of CagriSema where it's all in one pen. Now, what we learned here, and this is sort of some of the breaking news that came out of this, at least, what I'm concerned about for our patient community, is this co-formulation in a single chamber device is progressing really well, and it will only require bridging studies, not a full phase 3. So they'll be able to do a bridge study that shows the safety of this co-formulation. They won't have to do a whole nother phase 3 trial for CagriSema. So eventually, when it launches, it'll probably be in the dual chamber, but shortly thereafter, they'll have the co-formulation where it'll just be a single chamber. That'll be easier for Novo to bring to market because they'll be able to use existing pen technology. It's going to be interesting to see how they launch it. And maybe that's part of the holdup with CagriSema, is maybe they're waiting to launch it in the single formulation. So how long that bridge study trial will take, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to watch. Some other pipeline highlights is that they have a triple agonist in the pipeline. We talked about how they got rid of their GLP-1 GIP, which is a bummer, but they do have a GLP-1 GIP plus amylin triple agonist that is in phase 1 and may advance to phase 2 in 2026. Of course, oral semaglutide for obesity, it'll probably be called Wegovy, is expected to launch in the US without supply restrictions in 2026. So you're going to get high dose oral semaglutide, 25 milligrams, which gets you up to the efficacy around the injectable versions. And so that'll be exciting because that will launch around the same time as orforglipron, which is a small molecule GLP-1 agonist from Lilly that we get phase 3 trial data here in the next couple of months on. So it'll be interesting because they're going to launch high dose semaglutide, and around the same time, Eli Lilly launches orforglipron. Something interesting to watch. Of course, they're looking at discontinuing a couple other drugs like Zalfermin, which is an FGF21 for MASH, which was discontinued as they found semaglutide to be more effective for MASH. And there will be some readouts in some Alzheimer's trials, which obviously is sort of outside the realm of what we talk about. But again, with them focusing back on diabetes and obesity, it'll be interesting to see how these Alzheimer's trials all all come out because the Evoke and Evoke Plus trial readouts are those early stage semaglutide trials, and that's oral semaglutide. So imagine if the oral semaglutide trials show to be really good. This is a high risk, high reward play sort of for Novo Nordisk. But if that does well, imagine what the injectable data will be long term. So the Alzheimer's stuff will be very interesting to see as it relates to these GLP-1 candidates. Now, one of the interesting things also to come out of this is just some things that you can take back and talk to your doctor about, right? So Amycretin is probably the next biggest thing to come from Novo Nordisk because, again, CagriSema has failed to sort of differentiate too far from tirzepatide, but it offers hope for both oral and injectable options with substantial weight loss and comorbidity management. Novo is expanding GLP-1 access globally, so more countries will gain access to Wegovy soon. Now, one of the things that they did not discuss at length is the fact that next year alone, 87 countries, Dr. Reddy's, which is a company out of India, is going to launch in 87 countries next year with generic semaglutide. So all of this is going to have really big market implications on the accessibility of these medications around the world. But it will be interesting because one of the things that we know about just global health and semaglutide is that there is a 24% risk reduction in kidney related events. You can look at the FLOW trial for more information on that. There's a 26% cardiovascular risk reduction that we saw from the SUSTAIN 6 trial. Now, we have seen so much and so it's exciting to think about the expansion of both the branded medications and the generic versions of these medications. Of course, Hims and Hers is going to do a generic semaglutide in Canada next year. It's just exciting to think about the world getting access to treatment that can really change the health around the world. Of course, coming on the heels of all of this will be CagriSema, which I think is also an important thing to talk to your doctor about. If you're not doing well on the current treatments that are out there, adding that amylin agonist may be a game changer for some people. So those are all things that you want to definitely talk to your doctor about, and really, really be aware that Novo is pushing hard against regulatory shutdown of compounds. So if they're successful in that, you do need to be having conversations with your doctor about what can I do to get access to the branded versions of GLP-1 medications. If you are on compound semaglutide, just be having those conversations with your doctor about what do we do if I lose access to this, right? Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. I think it's just a freight train that's going to be too hard to slow down. But if it does, you do need to be having those conversations with your doctor and have a plan. Just have a plan. So Novo is betting the house on amylin. Will they acquire something else? Will they focus their target on something else? Because amylin seems to come with side effects that are hard to manage. Wegovy is still fighting an uphill battle in the cash market against Zepbound. I think they need to lower their price, and I'm hopeful that by the end of the year, maybe that plays into the market dynamics here of how they're adjusting their forecast down for sales. Will they lower the price? I think it's time. It's time for the new CEO to, if they want Novo Nordisk to be taken seriously as a player, they're going to have to lower the cost because they don't have anything great coming in the meantime. In the meantime, Eli Lilly has small molecule or orforglipron, which is probably going to be an easier medication for patients to adhere to than high-dose Rybelsus, as they have retatrutide coming. And the only thing we'll get from Novo Nordisk between now and 2027, 2028 is CagriSema. And CagriSema just has not proven itself to be that much superior to Eli Lilly's tirzepatide. So they're either going to have to make an acquisition here or they're going to have to lower the price. It's pretty much as simple as that. I don't think they'll be successful at shutting down compounds. So let's see what happens. Over the next few months. But that's the update from Novo Nordisk today. Stay tuned tomorrow as we will be covering very closely the Eli Lilly earnings call. All of this will take place tomorrow morning. And I hope that you'll follow along. Until then, make sure that you hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub, stay subscribed, stay in tune for more information just like this. If you found this video helpful, share it with a friend, and we will catch you, my friends, on the next one.